The wrong door was open. That was what Gwen noticed first, not the sound behind it, not even whose voice it was, just the fact of a hotel door left ajar by 2 inches on a floor where everything cost enough to be done correctly. The wedding was set to begin in 19 minutes. She had come looking for Trent, because the bridal suite had started to feel like a room where someone was waiting to deliver bad news, and the champagne had gone flat, and his jacket, charcoal wool, the one she had picked out with him in November because it photographed better than navy, was folded over the arm of a chair near the elevator bank, where it absolutely did not belong. Gwen was a forensic accountant. She found the thing that didn't belong for a living. She was very good at it. She pressed one hand flat against the hallway wallpaper, a neutral, expensive grey, the kind chosen specifically to avoid offending anyone, and stood outside room 3107 for 11 seconds. She counted them. Counting was what her brain did when it needed something solid to hold. She heard Lacey first. Not words, just breathing pulled too shallow, and then Trent's voice, low and deliberate, saying her name like it was something he kept in a separate pocket from everything else in his life. Gwen walked back to the bridal suite. Her heels made almost no sound on the carpet. She set her bouquet. Cream ranunculus, $112 per stem calculation, negotiated down from the florist's original quote, on the vanity. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long moment. Her eyeliner was perfect. Her hair was exactly as she'd asked for it. She looked like someone who had everything organized. She had felt that way yesterday. She had felt that way for most of 4 years. The nausea came and was brief, a body acknowledging damage, filing it, moving on. She pressed 2 fingers to her collarbone and breathed through it. Lacey, 3 years as a colleague, 7 months as a bridesmaid. Gwen had once defended her to Trent when he called her loud, said she wore too much perfume. Department store vanilla, the kind that colonized elevator air. Gwen had said she was warm, actually, and had meant it. The detail that her brain chose to fixate on, standing there in $2,040 of oyster silk, was that she had defended Lacey. She picked up her bouquet and walked out. The ceremony was on the hotel rooftop, open sky, downtown Toronto in every direction. Late May holding on to that last stubborn northern cold that always made Gwen feel obscurely at home. 180 guests, 60 more than she'd wanted, because Trent's clients needed to see him at a certain scale. She had watched him have that argument with himself, and call it a conversation with her. She walked the aisle. The event coordinator had offered her an arm. She had declined. Trent stood at the front in his charcoal suit, his expression arranged into something warm and relieved, like a man who had run a set of numbers and come out comfortable on every line. He had no idea she'd found the jacket. The minister began. Words moved past her, in the way language does when your attention has narrowed to one still point. She watched Trent's face with the specific focus she brought to documents she suspected had been altered, looking for the thing that didn't quite track. What she found was that his relief was a performance. Eyes a fraction too steady, the smile a fraction too calibrated, no real weight behind it. She had been reading this face for 4 years. She had not looked at it correctly until now. If anyone present has cause to object, the minister said, pausing for the ceremonial second, let them speak now. Gwen set her bouquet down on the nearest empty chair. I have something, she said. The sound carried. Someone in the 4th row made a short, startled noise. Trent's expression fractured before he pulled it back. Gwen, not a question, a warning. Lacey, Gwen said, turning slightly toward the guests. Her voice was even. She had given testimony in front of a provincial review board when she was 24. She did not shake when she stated fact. 3rd row, 2nd from the left. Sage green dress. She's been sleeping with him. Room 3107 about 30 minutes ago. Hotel security keeps the key card logs for 48 hours if anyone wants to verify. The silence that followed was complete. And then the sound she wasn't expecting, the heavy glass door at the back of the terrace opening, and footsteps that moved against the frozen stillness the way a blade moves against current. Not fighting it, just cutting through it cleanly. 3 men. They wore good suits and moved like something other than what the suits suggested. A quality of attention in how their eyes swept the terrace, measuring exits and weight and variables in the time it took most people to blink. The man at the front was taller than the other 2 and walked with the particular certainty of someone who had never once needed to hurry. He reached the front of the aisle and stopped. Trent went the color of old paper. "Harker," Trent said. The name left his mouth like something dropped. The man looked at Trent with the quality of attention Gwen associated with people who were very good at reading numbers. He took in the guests, the abandoned bouquet, Gwen standing approximately 2 feet from where she was supposed to be. Then he looked at Gwen, and she understood that he had already known she would be here and had already accounted for her in whatever he had come to do. "You owe me $4.2 million, Harker said. His voice was level and not loud, but it reached every corner of the rooftop. "And you owe me 7 months of my accounting team's time, which they spent trying to find where you moved it." "I was going to," Trent started. "Use the wedding gifts," Harker said, with the flat inflection of someone reading from a report. "Then stall. You have been stalling for 214 days. He turned his head and looked at Gwen, not with surprise, with the expression of someone recalibrating a calculation. "You're Gwen Farrow." "Yes," Gwen said. "Your signature is on 11 documents transferring funds through 3 shell companies I own." He said it without apology or accusation. "Forged, we believe, but forgeries that will take considerable time and expert testimony to untangle." A pause, the kind that ends careers. Gwen's chest was very still. Processing, "He used my credentials." "He used your credentials." She looked at Trent. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the floor in the specific way of someone calculating odds. She knew that look. She had seen it across boardroom tables from people who believed, right up until the moment they discovered otherwise, that they were the smartest person in the room. "All right," Gwen said. Harker looked at her carefully. "All right." "What do you want?" she said. "You didn't come here to arrest him. You came here for something else." He studied her for a moment. "Walk with me," he said. They stood at the edge of the terrace with Toronto laid out in every direction, and the wind finding the loose strands of Gwen's hair and doing what it wanted with them. One of Harker's men remained at a polite distance. The other 2 had stayed with Trent, which required no explanation. "My uncle is dying," Harker said. He said it the same way he'd said everything else. A line item. "He controls the transfer of the Eastern contracts, port operations, 12 years of infrastructure." He looked at the city. "He will not transfer them to me unless I am married." Settled was the word he used. People use that word when they mean something else entirely. "He means manageable," Gwen said. Harker looked at her. "He means he wants to believe certain things continue in a certain way. I have no interest in manufacturing a courtship. Less interest in the women who move through my world with calculations behind their eyes." A pause. "Present company possibly accepted." "I'm not interested in your money," Gwen said. She meant it, which surprised her. Standing there with nothing, no fiancé, no future, her professional reputation about to be dragged through a legal process she hadn't caused, she found she was mostly just very tired. "I'd be interested in my name being cleared." "That can be arranged. And I'd want to understand the full scope of what I'm agreeing to. In writing." She held his gaze. "I'm a forensic accountant, Harker. If I'm walking into something, I need to see the ledger." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, more the way a column shifts when a number that wouldn't reconcile finally does. "1 year," he said. "Family functions, public presence. My uncle holds a significant dinner every 6 weeks." He paused. "At the end of 12 months, you receive a settlement sufficient to rebuild completely. New practice if you want it. Full restitution for the professional damage." Another pause. "And I deliver Trent Kavanaugh to the appropriate authorities with documentation that removes you entirely from the picture." Gwen looked at Trent. He had caught her looking, and across the distance of the terrace, she watched him assemble something in his face. the silent plea of someone who had relied one final time on her compliance. She had been compliant for 4 years. "One condition," she said, turning back to Harker. "Go on. You tell me the truth about the danger. If someone in your family is coming for you, or for me by proximity, I want to know before it happens. I'm not useful to you if I'm walking in blind." He studied her the way careful people study contracts, looking for the hidden clause. "Agreed," he said. He extended his hand. Broad, the knuckles slightly asymmetric, a pale scar crossing the left palm in a line that looked too precise to be accidental. She took it. His grip was dry and completely still. "The minister looked like he was reconsidering his vocation," Harker said. "He's not the only one," Gwen said. The car was black, the interior smelling of conditioned leather and cold air and something sharp she couldn't place. Gwen sat with 3 feet of seat between herself and Harker and pulled pins from her hair one by one, letting them click into the cup holder. Her scalp had been aching since morning. "You're not going to ask where we're going," Harker said. "You said home." She pressed her fingers against the back of her neck where everything had knotted. "I'm assuming not an apartment. A property north of the city. Martha runs the house. She won't ask you questions." "Good." Gwen folded her hands in her lap and looked out the window. The lake appeared between buildings, flat and silver grey, and enormous the way it always was, the way that had startled her when she first came to Toronto from Sudbury at 22, how it looked like the edge of something, rather than the middle of anything. "You're not afraid," Harker said, not quite a question. "I'm afraid," she said. "I'm just not going to let it drive." He looked at her with the expression of someone adjusting a calculation. Trent described you as quiet, someone who handled the details in the background. People who underestimate accountants usually regret it. A pause. "What else did he tell you about me?" "Nothing. Your name was on the documents. I had your background checked." "And you grew up in the provincial care system. You put yourself through school. You passed your CPA on the first attempt, and your forensic designation the year after, which is not common." He glanced back at his phone. "You have no family who could be used as leverage and no significant debt. You own almost nothing." A pause that felt chosen. "You are, structurally, a difficult person to threaten." Gwen looked at him. "Is that why you picked me?" "It's why I considered you viable." He returned to his screen. "You identified 3 evidentiary facts in under 30 seconds on that terrace. That's why I picked you." She looked back at the window. The property was exactly what she had expected, and still managed to be more. Glass and dark timber cut into a hillside north of the city, the pine forest pressing up close on every side. The inside, clean and cold and purposeful in the way that meant no space, was wasted on things that didn't serve a function. A woman named Martha met them at the door with the expression of someone who had long ago stopped being surprised by anything. "Mrs. Farrow," Martha said. Gwen said, "Please." Martha's mouth made a small, almost private adjustment. Gwen understood it had been a test of some kind, and that she had passed. Her room was large and quiet and almost entirely without warmth, not hostile, just deliberate like the rest of the house. A window looked directly into the dark wall of pines. Martha had left clothes folded on the chair, black leggings, a grey sweater that turned out to be cashmere and that Gwen estimated at roughly $400, which was more than her first month's rent in Toronto. She put it on anyway. Her wedding dress was gone when she came back from the bathroom. She didn't ask where. She was sitting on the edge of the bed running through the financial implications of the afternoon, because she could not entirely stop herself when the door opened. Harker was carrying a glass of water. He stopped just inside the doorway. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I wasn't planning to eat at my own wedding. Anxiety." She looked at the glass. "Thank you." He set it on the nightstand. He'd removed his jacket. She noticed for the first time that the scar on his left hand extended up the wrist and likely further. He noticed her noticing. "Old debt," he said. "Yours or someone else's?" "Mine." He picked up the jacket. "Breakfast at 7. Harker. He paused at the door. Why not hire someone, an actress, someone trained for this? He turned. The low light made his face entirely angles. My uncle has spent 60 years watching people lie to him, he said. He would know a performance. A pause that felt longer than it was. He will not know you. That's not a full answer, Gwen said. No, he agreed, but it is the truthful one. He pulled the door closed behind him without a sound. Walter Harker was 81 and dying in increments, and still the most alert person in any room he occupied. He sat at the head of a mahogany table at his estate on Lake Ontario and looked at Gwen the way people look at things they've been told to expect but want to assess for themselves. To his left sat Constance. A cousin Harker had explained in the car with the tone of someone briefing a colleague, 10 years his senior, with structural ambitions regarding the Eastern contracts and a long practice of finding the weakness in whatever stood between her and them. She looked at Gwen across the table with the specific quality of attention that Gwen associated with quarterly reviews and people who came to them already knowing what they wanted the numbers to say. You're younger than I expected, Walter said. I've been told that, Gwen said, usually by people who changed their minds. Walter made a sound that had laughter somewhere inside it. Constance did not. This situation reads as impulsive, Constance said, to the table rather than to Gwen directly, a woman no one knows at the end of a very public scene. It was impulsive, Gwen said. Constance looked at her, apparently surprised to be addressed. My fiancé had committed fraud against your family and buried the documentation inside my professional records. I discovered he was sleeping with my bridesmaid 40 minutes before the ceremony. Harker offered me a way out of both problems at once. She picked up her wine glass. From a purely strategic standpoint, it was the most rational decision I'd made in 4 years. Constance's mouth thinned. Walter laughed, a dry, real sound. He pointed one finger at Harker. She's better than you deserve. Probably, Harker said without any particular inflection. I'll take that as a compliment, Gwen said. It was, Walter said, and looked at her with something adjacent to respect. Eat. You look like someone who's been running on adrenaline since morning. He reached for the bread. Tell me how you two actually met. Not the version Emmett told me, the real one. Gwen glanced at Harker. He was watching her with the very specific expression of someone who has decided to trust a calculation they can't fully verify yet. He walked into a situation I was already handling, she said. I was handling it poorly. You were handling it fine, Harker said. I was handling it alone, Gwen said, which isn't the same thing. Walter looked between them and said nothing more on the subject. The rain came in on the drive home, the hard sideways kind, the kind that reminded Gwen of October in Sudbury, of waiting at a bus shelter with a garbage bag over her school bag because that was the year she couldn't afford a proper backpack. She sat with her shoes already off and her back against the door and let the wine's warmth bleed away into something quieter. Constance will challenge the succession, Harker said. Yes, Gwen turned her head. He was reading again, the blue light of the screen lighting the underside of his jaw. What did you do to Trent? He looked up. His accounts were frozen this morning. He was removed from his consulting contracts at noon. I have a controlling interest in 2 of the 3 firms he worked through. He set the tablet in the seat-back pocket. His lease is held by a property management group I own. He received his notice this afternoon. A pause. The documents establishing the fraud will reach the appropriate investigators at the end of the week. Your name is absent from the material. Gwen was quiet. The highway lights bled red through the rain on the glass. And his credit, she said. A crater, Harker said, by Monday morning. He will spend a significant portion of the rest of his life working out from under it. He looked at her without expression. He moved $4.2 million. He will spend the equivalent of that in lost opportunity cost before he's 50. A pause. He is comprehensively finished. She thought about the janitor's closet. That wasn't a janitor's closet. She thought about Lacey's voice pulled shallow, and the 4 years she had spent adjusting her own conclusions rather than questioning the underlying data. She had been trained to find what people hide. She had found everything except what was right in front of her. "Do you pity him?" Harker said. It was a genuine question. He was measuring something. "No," Gwen said. The word came out solid and surprised her slightly with how solid it was. "I pity the version of myself that would have." Harker looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the console and closed his hand over hers. Not a gesture, not a statement. Just his hand covering hers, warm and still. The scar across his palm pressing faintly against her knuckles. She did not pull away. She did not say anything. Neither did he. They rode like that through the dark and the rain, the city falling away behind them, the pines beginning at the edges of the headlights, and Gwen sat with the weight of his hand over hers and thought, "This is the most ill-advised thing I have ever done." She also thought, "I have not been afraid since we left the terrace." The second thought settled somewhere below her ribs, quiet and unfamiliar, like a figure appearing in the columns that she hadn't entered and couldn't yet explain. Not an error. She understood, slowly, but a variable she hadn't thought to account for. She left her hand where it was.